Chapter 4. The Tower. O felt a smoother, slipperier texture under his feet when he stepped off the path onto the frozen sidewalk of the once busy city street. He wasn't sure whether frost covering the ground would be any different on the sidewalk, but the crunching sound with each footstep definitely changed on the sidewalk. Maybe the sidewalk gets more foot traffic. O smiled to himself, proud of his levity. Lamp on. The darkness reluctantly gave way as the bright light came to bear on the street. The deep cold temperatures had caused the roads to crack and buckle in many places, with the street signs and poles leaning randomly as though controlled by some drunken puppet master. Ice crystals had formed to various degrees on the roads, sidewalks, and buildings, combining with his headlamp to provide the impression of a winter wonderland, something not previously associated with Houston. Out of habit, he turned his head to the right, left, then right again, surveying the street for non-existent traffic. Lamp off. Darkness encased him once again, and his eyes returned their focus to the miniature map displayed inside his helmet. A familiar flashing yellow building came into view, a block away. The tower, he acknowledged. After hiking for the past couple of hours, he couldn't help but smile at the thought of getting out of his life suit and kicking back with Yari. As much as he relished his solo excursions outside, he was always pleased when they came to a successful conclusion, especially when it included a stop at her place. His thoughts returned to Yari. She had something urgent and vital to share. Of course, with Yari, everything seemed urgent and vital. She was an intense person. At nearly 30 and having only known darkness all her life, she had been raised as part of an experimental group of children, biomedically engineered to better adapt to the sunless environment. Yari was also a victim of gene editing gone awry. Instead of having the genomes intended to increase her fertility, she had the opposite happen. She couldn't bear children, something she never complained about, and for O, it was one less thing to contemplate. A cartoon door suddenly popped up on his helmet's visor again, replacing the map, followed by the knock knock. He stopped to focus on Yari's miniature avatar. "Speak of the devil," he said, noting the coincidence of Yari's call with his thoughts of her. His technology-paranoid mind couldn't help but wonder if the network's artificial intelligence was now smart enough to monitor all of a person's thoughts. If so, Yari would likely be the first to figure out how to exploit the capabilities. She would probably monitor the world for anyone thinking of her. "Answer call," he said aloud, though he could have simply sent his thoughts to the computer. A window popped up with Yari staring back at him. Leaning in close to the camera, as though in eager anticipation, her face filled his entire visor screen. O couldn't see her mid-length black hair and assumed she had it in her customary pigtails. Meanwhile, her mouth rapidly chewed on something, building his interest in what she kept hidden in her mouth. Since the last of the bubblegum had been chewed up decades ago, gone with all the other non-essentials, his curiosity had him studying her lips for evidence. She seemed so close. He half expected computer-generated saliva to splatter in his eyes through the visor screen. As if on cue, O suddenly thought he felt moisture on his face, as though Yari had sprayed him with spit. His hand automatically went to his face to feel it and wipe it away, but his helmet stopped him. A few focused eye movements and thoughts, and O's visor became a mirror, allowing him to look closely at his nose and cheeks where he had felt the moisture. Nothing was there. Confused, O switched his visor back to display Yari, who stared emotionlessly back at him, awaited his response. "Hey, Yari! Hey, O! Did she just the US me?" O thought. He referred to the ultrasonic sound emitter, primarily used to simulate touch in conjunction with virtual reality applications. If she did, how did she know I was just thinking about getting spit on during her chewing frenzy? He decided his best reaction would be to ignore it. Act like it never happened. "Can you lean in some more?" asked O. "If your nose blocks the rest of the camera, then I won't have to gaze upon your extreme fugliness." Actually, he thought she could be called anything but fugly. As much as the technicians had screwed up on her childbearing function, O thought they had scored 5 stars on her hotness genes. He guessed she had some sort of Asian-African gene mix. She was petite, a common trait trending across the human race, and had a gymnast's physique and a bronze skin tone that supermodels would envy. For O, however, it was her eyes that enthralled him the most. Though having thick artificial lenses, her eyes had an amazing electric hazel color that seemed to transform with her mood. In contrast to her perpetual poker face, her eyes frequently provided transparency to her thoughts and feelings. His colleagues shook their heads when he would point it out, but he had little doubt. Yari's eyes would sparkle a deep sky blue when focused on a difficult challenge and become a soft, sultry brown when standard protocol was on her mind. When her eyes radiated a deep green, O took it as his cue to shut up and get out of her way. "Oh, you are late. I was about to start without you. The doors are unlocked." As usual, Yari seemed to ignore O's banter, and their session abruptly concluded with the sound of a loud door slam. He closed his eyes, keeping Yari's last image fresh in his mind. Were her eyes brown or green? He couldn't tell. Moments later, O came up the final steps to the building, and a red triangle popped onto O's visor. A warning message echoed in his helmet, indicating the likelihood of walking into the tower's entrance door. He had been given a similar warning just after he had stepped on the frozen oak branch. He had learned his lesson, and this time he monitored his surroundings more closely, allowing himself a better opportunity to stop before impact. As much as he appreciated technology and had an endless curiosity for its potential, he disliked its interference in social development and self-reliance. Artificial intelligence had become so advanced that O frequently imagined a personality during his computer interactions. He found himself responding with sarcasm and reprimands as though the computer was arrogant or a child or both. He stepped back, and the warning sound and flashing red triangle stopped. He stepped forward, and the warning started again. He stepped back and smiled. Forward and back, forward and back. He wondered if the computer's AI could become irritated. He knew it wasn't possible, but couldn't resist the urge to try. He grinned at the realization that perhaps the computer wasn't the only one capable of acting like a child. His visor's screen visualized the door about 2 feet away. He reached out for the door handle, swaying his hand back and forth, but he didn't touch anything. He leaned forward, stretching further, and he watched the computer-rendered form of his arm on the screen, seemingly reaching out and passing through the door handle. He took a half step forward, and his fingers made contact with the door itself. "Humph," he grunted. He disabled his visor and turned on his headlamp to look directly at the door without the computer's aid. What had once been a rectangular handle designed for a person to pull now only had 2 small protrusions of metal left. The bar that had once connected the protrusions, allowing a person to grasp it, was missing. O suspected that at some point, someone had pulled the handle, trying to open the door, and the frigid metal bar had fractured. O looked back and forth, studying the differences between the computer's virtual image of the door and what he saw with his natural eyesight. Besides the broken handle, he noted the computer had covered up cosmetic differences, such as small scratches and the door's weathered appearance and color. However, it also hid some larger concerning cracks in the door, which O worried could indicate developing structural issues. This wasn't the first time he had noticed differences like these, nor was this an unknown phenomenon. The developers of the network's AI, including Yari, actively promoted the differences as simply subtle, visually pleasing enhancements. The computer's AI software apparently deemed the tower's door handle as a non-essential detail and presented a virtual image of an intact handle instead of showing its damaged reality. After all, most people didn't use door handles anymore, and O was one of the very few people who still preferred using their natural eyesight. Okay, I get that the network is intended to enrich our lives, he thought, remembering his past debates with Yari. But losing track of reality cannot possibly be a good thing. He then added, "And why didn't I notice the broken handle before? Who else around here would try to open a door manually?" "Open door," he mumbled, succumbing to another reliance on the network's automation. Something beeped, the door swung inward, and O strode into the tower's lobby. After the door closed securely with a loud clank, he yanked off his helmet and took a deep breath. For a moment, even after the door had closed, it felt like he was still outside, as though the darkness and frigid air had pursued him into the building. Then abruptly, bright white light radiated around him, fending off the outside's assault and illuminating the lobby. Yari had automated the lighting for O, who preferred it to the electronic visualization provided by networked helmets and glasses. The bright lights contrasted the past few hours of ambient lighting and forced him to squint. A loud swishing sound reverberated as a wave of heat materialized to combat the cold that had attempted to invade the building. His eyes watered. The lobby boasted a massive, open, empty space, with hallways leading off in different directions to unused offices, cafes, and elevators. Previous floor-to-ceiling windows had been replaced with reinforced insulation, giving the feel of a gymnasium with everything but the basketball hoops. Spacious areas with chairs and coffee tables existed throughout to facilitate casual conversations, meeting places, or to enjoy a morning cappuccino. O recalled the time decades ago when it was filled with the hustle and bustle of business people moving about like bees in a hive. Now, however, the building only echoed an immense dust-filled emptiness, a reminder of all that had been lost with the sun. Tilting his head at an angle, the lighting's glare on the tile flooring highlighted the pathway. O and a few others walked when visiting, evidence of the decades of unuse of most of the tower. O sighed. He stepped out of his boots and unfastened the top of his life suit. His body involuntarily shivered in relief as the deep cold's last tentacles dissipated into the lobby's warmth. Carrying his helmet in one hand, in the building's quiet, he could hear his socked feet while he shuffled past the lobby's front desk. The desk, which had once doubled as an information booth and security post, still had a couple of empty chairs neatly tucked under it, and two aged computer monitors silently sitting on top, disconnected. In the old days, he reflected, this equipment would be considered vintage and traded by collectors online. But not today. The centers provided for everyone's necessities, with non-essential items being frowned upon as wasted resources. He caught himself dwelling in the past again. "I need to get my button gear before Yari starts without me," he said, his words echoing across the lobby. O bounded down the hallway, tossing his helmet back and forth between his hands, anticipating his rendezvous with Yari. The elevator door automatically opened when he walked up to it, and he stepped inside without breaking his stride. The door closed, but then nothing moved. Complete silence. A puzzled look came to his face. Then he shrugged. 80, he said, and the elevator started to rise. He watched the elevator floor digits fly by in their race to the top. The only other floors familiar to him were 20 and 21, which held the data centers supporting most of the monitoring and communications equipment for the Houston Center. In hindsight, the center's designers wish they had put the data center underground in the city instead of in the tower. Still, decisions had to be made quickly back then, and there were differing views about what would become most essential post-Sun. The tower had been the tallest and most modern building in Houston before Black Dawn and was solely Yari's domain. She was the administrator and brains behind the massive computing power it housed. The United Nations had chosen Houston as one of the world's going-forward population centers based on its proximity to NASA, a vast array of oil and gas facilities, access to the ocean, a large healthcare establishment, and the city's existing underground tunnel system. Houston was also part of a high-speed underground transportation highway stretching across Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona, although all the other stops were now dormant. Unfortunately, time had run out before Houston's tunnels could be extended to the tower. Another reason O had hiked on ground. "Ugh, forgot the flash," O muttered. He remembered the flash of light in the sky he had observed during his hike. Yari excelled at these types of challenges, and he chided himself for forgetting to mention it. Knowing Yari, she would have already solved the mystery. Not wanting to endure another virtual door slam, he engaged the computer to send her a text message instead. Message Yari. "Hey, Yari, what was that flash of light in the sky I saw about an hour ago? Send." "Message sent," came the standard automated voice, although with an Australian female accent. He continued to watch the numbers pass by on the elevator monitor, 61 to 62 to 63. He wondered how he would get up or down in the event of a power outage. Or even worse, what would they do if a critical elevator component irreparably broke down, a scenario increasingly more common as the shelters age. With Yari's energy and bioengineered strength, she would probably bound up and down the stairways without issue. He, however, would need an alternative to 80 floors of stairs. For getting down, maybe a zip line from the top of the tower to the city's entrance, he thought. I need to stick that idea in the council's suggestion box. Oh, you are absolutely on fire with ideas today, he said to himself. Anticipation added to his excitement as he realized he would be with Yari in a few moments. He had been looking forward to their weekly meetup, and her mysterious smirk on the way over seemed to slow time. He looked at the clock on the elevator panel and saw it was already 15:45. Oh, I'm late again. Can't you go any faster? Oh asked the elevator.